Language and reality. The words you use create your reality, how language controls you. Before beginning, I would like to clarify that I do not work for any dictionary, encyclopedia, or any other authority on language. The following is a reflective essay. It should not be considered a source of information or an academic paper. Its purpose is to invite discussion and to change the way we live. Synonyms are not the same. To me, the definition of a synonym is a word that, in context, represents another word or concept. And context is the key word here. We can affirm that a dog is a canine, and we can affirm that a wolf is a canine. But we cannot affirm that a dog is a wolf, at least not without a pejorative intention or to elevate the image of the dog. This is a key concept for many of the ideas I handle. If two words exist for one idea, it is because each word has a different meaning. This is also why the expression semantics, used to disqualify an idea, is so irritating to me. Each word carries a load of valuable information that we often interpret incorrectly because we confuse it with its synonyms. It might seem like an exaggeration to demand that everyone knows every meaning. And yet, my perception is that we have deformed not just language, but life itself, by confusing one thing for another and assigning meanings to words that are not what they were originally meant to have. In Spanish, the term mariquita means feminine or delicate. But currently, no one uses the term in that way. Today it means homosexual, effeminate, and cowardly. In English, the term queer means unconventional or unusual. Today it is used almost exclusively to define non-conventional genders. Reading Alice in Wonderland in English was an interesting experience because Alice spent her time exclaiming how queer, at every turn. Another example is an anecdote that almost cost a coworker his job. Wanting to appear cultured, he used the word conmaner, to enjoin/threaten, instead of invita, to invite, because in his head it sounded better. He was unaware that while conmaner is a type of invitation, it is one that carries an implicit threat and punishment. After living through this, wouldn't it be better to prepare ourselves and know the context of what we say? It's not about everyone speaking correctly all the time, but about questioning, why do two different words exist to say the same thing? The important words. Having cleared that up, let's explore the most important, confusing, and central definitions of this philosophy, full of magic and fractured reality. The first definition is the most important and, absurdly, the most complex in its simplicity. Reality, it is what it is. This definition comes with a few clarifications. Reality is not what I perceive. Reality is not what I believe. Reality is not what I think. Reality is not what I know. Regardless of our perception as human beings and our ability to understand the abstract, reality remains what it is, no matter what we think, believe, or perceive. A simple example, regardless of whether I believe in ghosts or not, and regardless of how much evidence I have of their existence or non-existence, whether they are real or not is completely independent of me. The next definition is also simple and confusing. Existence. Existence, it is everything that can be perceived. And as you will realize, complexity lies within simplicity. Because no matter how sharp our senses are, we know that atoms exist, but we cannot see, touch, or smell them. It is here where the idea of perception divorces itself from the senses and enters a mental plane. We know atoms exist because through experiments we can capture with our senses and concepts we can rationalize, we demonstrate that they exist and are part of reality. This is where the importance of not using synonyms lies. That which is real exists, but not everything that exists is real. Take note, I did not use the word everything when defining the relationship between reality and existence. Because it would be impossible to affirm or deny it, unless we can claim to possess all the senses necessary to perceive reality, this sentence must remain ambiguous. The other confusing relationship is that of existence with reality. To demonstrate it, I would like to cite an example from the series The Fairly OddParents, where they talk about a world where 2 + 2 is fish. This phrase was not only uttered in the series, it has also been used in memes and examples, like this one, and has become something tangible, at least on a mental level. It can be cited and reproduced. However, I pity the mathematician who tries to solve any operation with this answer, because 2 + 2 is 4 and can only be 4, that is the reality. In summary, 2 + 2 = fish, exists, is not real. 2 + 2 is equal to 4, exists, is real. Truth or lie? Now that the thorny subject of existence is cleared up, let's talk about something equally simple and confusing, the truth. Truth, any statement that affirms reality. Lie, any statement that denies reality. Although there is an almost divine concept of the truth, the reality is that what people commonly understand as the truth is actually the reality, hoping that with words we can explain everything around us. The fact is that words fall short of enveloping something so large that it actually exceeds our limits. Instead, let's simply understand the truth as a small piece of the puzzle that is reality. And regardless, we must be careful with these pieces, as they can often seem contradictory to one another, and it becomes easier for us to discard the truths we cannot process. An example of this is the story of the 3 blind men and the elephant. Each blind man touches a different part of the elephant. One touches the trunk, another the side, and another the tail. When they try to define what an elephant is like, they cannot agree and call the others liars because their descriptions do not match the truth they perceived. All three are telling the truth, it is their inability to reconcile three truths into one reality that limits them. And just in case, I must clarify that speaking of affirmations or negations in the definitions of truth and lie does not mean the statements must be in positive or negative form. For example, truth, elephants are not light. Lie, elephants are light. Affirming that elephants are light denies reality. Power. Now let's talk about power, a subject that has all of humanity fascinated and one we rarely take the time to reflect upon. Power, the ability to influence reality. Reality is what it is, but it doesn't necessarily have to stay that way. Reality is in constant motion, changing all the time, sometimes radically, sometimes so slowly it seems constant. The fact that we are part of reality gives us a certain level of influence over it and control over some things within it. To understand this complex concept, let's ask a few questions. What is power to God? What is power to a demigod? What is power to a demon? What is power to a messiah? What is power to a cleric? What is power to a king? What is power to a president? What is power to a politician? What is power to a union leader? Power is not something immediate. It requires working with reality and its rules. A politician cannot force a person to think like him, but he has the power to influence their thoughts and lead them to think like him. At that moment, reality changes. The person adopts a new idea they didn't have before, and therefore, reality is different. Magic. Now let's talk about magic. This is where I throw the dictionary out the window, as I haven't found a definition that doesn't speak of the supernatural. And yet, I understand where the confusion comes from. In fiction and reality, there are many examples of magic: fireballs, levitation, becoming invisible, living forever, transforming into other people or animals, changing destiny. What do all these things have in common? First, yes, they are all supernatural. But they also share a more characteristic and universal pattern: they change reality. Unlike power, magic does not influence reality, it modifies it completely. The politician no longer has to convince the person to change their way of thinking, he simply makes them think differently, and that's it. In my view, this definition is more real than the ones we use in pocket dictionaries because it doesn't pigeonhole magic into the realm of the supernatural but allows it to live within nature. We can also witness real magic, that which is grounded in reality. To me, the clearest example of real magic is a mundane event repeated thousands of times across the world every minute: the birth of a person. Every human life changes reality in unpredictable ways. Probably the relationship between magic and power is the closest thing to an authentic synonym, and yet we can observe and understand their differences. Magic is power, power is magic. It is impossible to change reality without making other things move and influence others. That is why magic is power. And having the capacity to simply change things can allow us to influence reality. Destiny and freedom. The concept of destiny, like almost all the definitions we have seen, is excessively simple and complex at the same time. Destiny, the tendency without influence. What we call destiny is merely the inertia of things to continue along a certain path until reaching a certain point. It is less supernatural and more physical, mathematical. If we follow a specific vector without any force influencing its trajectory, it will maintain a constant direction. Destiny as a magical and mystical aspect is a very common perception, but that doesn't mean it's real. However, destiny as such is real. This is where another term, often used by philosophers, is born: freedom. Freedom, the capacity to exercise power. If we are clear on what power is, we can affirm that freedom is our capacity to exercise that power, that is, to influence reality. And surely you are thinking, what does that have to do with destiny? Where is the dichotomy between freedom and destiny? The fact is, that dichotomy is not entirely real. If we see destiny as the trajectory of a boy who likes mathematics, studies mathematics, eats mathematics, and does mathematics even in his sleep, it shouldn't surprise us that this boy is destined to be a great mathematician. However, suppose that during his adolescence, he also learns about music and begins to weave mathematical concepts with musical ones. That boy can decide to exercise his power, learn music to become a musician, or follow his destiny and become a mathematician. If he exercises his power, he can change his destiny. Life and its meaning. The meaning of life is a deep thought for which everyone expects a single, universal answer. Well, stop looking, we will see it right here. But to understand it, we must define a couple more concepts. Sign, a manifestation of reality that can be emitted, perceived, and interpreted. Meaning, the interpretation of the signs we perceive. Signs are manifestations of reality. The simplest example I can give to understand this are vital signs. Temperature, pulse, respiration, brain activity, and blood pressure are manifestations that we are alive, expressed in different modes and measures, for example, body temperature in degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit. However, signs are passive, on their own, they do nothing. It isn't until they are perceived and interpreted. In the same example, a person with a temperature of 36 degrees Celsius signifies they are healthy, while someone with a temperature of 40 degrees Celsius signifies they have a fever and their life is in danger. After understanding this, we can finally reach the definition of life. Life, the meaning we attribute to the signs of reality. I suppose you didn't expect that. So the meaning of life is the meaning of meaning? That's right. Life is the relationship we have with reality, whether physical, biological, chemical, mental, spiritual, social, etc. So, it is time to stop looking for the meaning of life and, instead, give it one. Remember, the power is yours.